Hey everyone, it's Nighthorror here, and today I've got a guide for you for veteran Rockgrove. Now I know this trial has been out for a bit, but as far as I can tell, all the guides out there are geared towards just how to do the trial, some mechanics and stuff like that, but they're not specifically geared for your first clear. And that's what I want to make this video for. This is like just get the clear, tips and tricks, all the stuff you can do, kind of spread the workload if you know some part of the trial is hard for one particular role, etc. So anyways, that's what we're going to be doing today. As always, there are timestamps below, so if you want to skip to the part you're having problems with or that you want to check out, review, whatever, feel free to go ahead and do that. Now, how I'm going to format this here is we're going to start off with just kind of like what are the minimum requirements you want before you probably go into this trial. Then a few general tips and tricks is going to be very quick. And then after that, we'll just be moving through the trial. So it'll just be from beginning to end, going over everything along the way. So I'm going to do my best here, but if you have any questions, if I leave anything out, feel free to ask them below. So let's go ahead and start off here with what you want your group to have, what kind of experience level and DPS and all that kind of stuff you want to have before you go into this trial. I think one of the worst things you can do as a raid lead is take people to content they're not ready for, because it is just hugely frustrating for them and for everybody else in the group. You know, if you have someone who's dead on the ground the whole time, they're never going to want to run another trial ever again. And if you have someone who's dead on the ground the whole time, you're going to have other people going, why is this person here? So it's not a fun experience for anybody. So the things that I would recommend for this trial is that you have all your DPS have at least a 65k parse. You can do it with less than that. Actually, many of the boss fights here are very forgiving with low DPS. And I think that's because they considered that you might have a lot of people dead on the ground for part of the fights. But the trash pools are particularly hard. And those you really want everybody kind of on their A game. With that, having an optimized group, a lot of people who are beginning and starting to get into vet trials, they feel for whatever reason that, you know, having a couple different sets, having a trash setup and other stuff is like really sweaty and really, you know, whatever. And I don't know, maybe it is, sure, whatever. But the thing that I would try to instill in everybody is that having an optimized group is more important the less experience you have. The reason for that is because having a group that is, and not perfectly optimized, but having a group that is trying to be optimized is more important. Having your healers and tanks rather in DPS increasing sets is so much more important if your group already has low DPS, because they might be close to that threshold of like, we don't have enough DPS. And if you can have your healers not in selfish sets and have your tanks not in selfish sets and have them in sets that are going to buff the group DPS, then that's really going to help out the entire group. If you're curious about what I mean by all that stuff and what all that is, you want to learn more about it, I have videos that go over healer and tanking gear and just kind of go over like what you ideally want to be wearing. And again, it is more important for groups that are new with low DPS that are sub-optimized. So it's more important for casuals to be optimized than it is for like super experienced and sweaty groups. The reason is those super sweaty groups, everybody's parsing 90k, 100k. And so it's not that big a deal if the tank's not wearing optimal sets because they still have plenty of DPS to get through everything. Anyways, that's why I recommend that. So I would recommend all DPS have a 65k parse, and then I recommend all DPS have a trash setup. And what I mean by trash setup is that you have skills that you swap out on your bar that are more AoE focused, and that you have a sets that you wear for trash that are geared towards that. If you're looking for setups like that, Skinny Cheeks in all of his videos goes over trash setups. He has one for everything he's done. If you have questions below, I can maybe help you out with a few, or better yet, drop into the Discord and you can ask questions there. We have DPS help channels, and there's a ton of people that are more than happy to help you out. All right. So then I mentioned that, you know, you don't want this to be your first veteran trial clear. I recommend that you probably have cleared at least 4 or 5 other vet trials. So most of the Craglorns and then at least a couple of others. I know sometimes it can be hard to get groups for some of them, but you probably want some experience elsewhere before you come here for your first veteran trial. Otherwise, it's going to be really frustrating. And then other than that, you just really want people that have a pretty good grasp on their character, have a good rotation, and then know what to swap out to make their character more survivable whenever they need to. A few specific tips here for tanks. Generally, you're probably going to be wearing something like Yolnakrin and Alkosh and Kratos for your main tank. Off tank is probably going to wear something like Saxleal, Powerful Assault, and Kratos or something else. And then you could swap those out. Alkosh, you could do Worm or Stone Talker would also be fine. You could do Baron Zadras is a good ulti generating set. Engine Guardian is good for sustain. You could rock Master Sword and Board on a few fights. I'll mention that for a little bit extra healing. Torque of Tonal Constancy is really nice. Could be useful in the first boss to get back more stamina if you have if your off tank is having problems chaining in all the ads. Bloodlord's Embrace is another one. Those are all things that you could potentially swap out on your character to keep you survivable, and there's plenty more. I'm just mentioning a handful. For your healers, you're probably going to be in a Rojo setup with Symphony of Blades. Then your other healers probably going to be in Spell Power Cure, and then some sort of sustain set, or maybe like Saxleal for barrier spams. And we'll talk about that on the ad pools. And then whatever flex they want for their monster set. I will point out here that a couple useful abilities that you definitely want to have for this trial are for a healer, Radiating Regeneration. This is, you can kind of use this as a spammable. You need to hit it like 2 or 3 times to get it on the entire group. But this is one way of increasing your overall heal over times you've got on the group to make sure you keep everybody alive when people are not standing where they're supposed to, when people are running off on their own, whatever. Things are going wrong. Having Radiating Regeneration up a lot of the time will definitely help you out in this trial, and I do recommend it. For tanks, Flare reduces your damage taken now by 10%. It's huge. Put it on your front damage mitigation bar. If you're a healer or a tank, I have videos on kind of setups for you for most of the tanks. I have one for DK and Necro tanks, and I have kind of a general healer guide for what you should have on your bar. In general, you want to go really healing focus for healers, and tanks, you want to go really survival focus for this entire trial. All right, so for those of you who don't know, all trials and dungeons have what we would call preview mechanics. So what I mean by that is that when you enter that trial or dungeon, you're going to have an experience where you run into a mob that does something and it's a new mechanic to you, and it's kind of an easy fight. And the whole purpose of that fight is not so you can go in and blast that thing down. It's so that if you haven't seen the mechanic, you can see what it looks like in a more controlled environment. And Veteran Rockgrove is no different. And I say veteran because in normal, everything dies so fast you can't tell. So first thing up here is the Death Hoppers, which are the frogs. So what they do is they spit and they hit, I think, 3 targets. It might be 4, 3 or 4 targets with a kind of the spit that they shoot up in the air. And even if a tank has taunt, it will still hit several other people with that. So that's important for later. It doesn't do a ton of damage, so it's not a huge deal, but it does become an issue later with the first boss. And next up here, we have the Reaver, which is the 2-handed wielding Argonian with the big mace thing. And he has 2 mechanics that you need to worry about. The first one is just for tanks, and that is that his light attacks hit really hard. Reaver light attacks will almost one-shot you or might one-shot you, depending on your setup. Either way, it's not good. You want to make sure you're blocking, and it's light attacks, so you can't respond. So you kind of just have to hold block whenever you have them. And if you have to move them, you probably want to be dodge rolling away or holding block as you move. Those are because otherwise, again, you'll get one shot or you'll almost get one-shotted, and then, something else will hit you like a feather and you'll die. Now, their second mechanic everybody needs to worry about, and that is this ground AoE. It's called Earthquake. And whenever this ground AoE happens, what you want to do, and TC Lee from the Tank Club covered this pretty well in his tanking video on this, but you want to roll towards the group whenever that happens, and the group just needs to back up. The reason you want to do that is because you're trying to keep all of the ads in the ground dots. A lot of classes have ground AoEs they put down to do damage, and if you roll left, right, or back, they're going to have to recast those abilities. So that takes time, and it reduces overall DPS. And some of these fights, again, the whole reason I said it's more important that new groups be optimized, some of these fights, you're just barely getting the kill off before a mechanic happens that kills you or that could kill the group. So if you can keep them in those ground AoEs, it will be much easier for everybody. So try and get in the habit of rolling towards the group whenever you see that earthquake happen, and the group just steps back a little bit, and hopefully the mobs stay in those ground AoEs as best they can. Now up the stairs here, there's a Hashimoto. He moves around, so depending on how quickly your first couple of fights went, he might be in a different spot. But either way, it's nothing to really worry about too much. Just turn away from the group and kill him. It's not really a big deal. He does some mechanics, but nothing you really need to worry about. And we won't see another Hashimoto in this trial, so we don't need to worry about his mechanics too much. Now, next up, we're going to have a Reaver on the right, a Reaver on the left and a Bloodseeker on the right. The Bloodseekers is the new target here. So we'll have the main tank grab the Reaver, and the off tank will grab the Bloodseeker. Bloodseekers do a channeled attack, taking aim, or it might be called something else, but it's basically the same thing. And they just need to be bumped. They just need to be interrupted. And that's pretty much it. They do teleport after a minute, and so you might have to range stack them. If you're not sure what range stacking is, just give it a Google. I'm sure there's a video out there. Basically what it is they want to stay at maximum range whenever they can. So you need to run away from them, and that'll pull them. And so you can stack them by kind of keeping taunt on them and running away. And again, you start off by it's always easier to have the melee targets brought to the range targets, and so that's what we do here, and it's not too bad. Now, in the next fight, there's going to be a whole bunch of ads, and there's also going to be a Soulweaver. The Soulweaver is the new target, the new ad that we haven't seen yet, and I'm skipping the mini-boss because I think that's pretty easy, and I think most people have done the farm on that and kind of know the mechanics. And I would recommend, especially if you're progging this, to not do the mini-boss. You're just kind of wasting time. Until you get the clear, just skip it for now. And anyways, so the Soulweaver. So what we're going to do is we're going to run up here, and I'm going to run all the way to the back. The Soulweaver is usually back here behind this kind of broken pillar or statue or whatever this is, and then have everybody else, have the main tank chain in all the ads and just kill them. The reason you want to do that is because what the Soulweaver does is something called Astral Shield. Astral Shield, you'll see it pop up here. It's white, and you can see that the target has those kind of blue bars at the end of its health, and that's showing how much shield it has left. Now, what happens as you DPS down the shield, it eventually goes away, and when it does, it explodes, and it shoots out these little white arrows at the group. Anybody within 28 meters gets shot at, and every single shield does this. So what we did, and I want to say thanks to Nate. He suggested this strategy here. I hadn't thought about this. I don't know why, but I appreciate it, Nate. Thank you. But the reason you pull it back to the back is you can kill all the ads, and then you can have everybody come over, and they can see what this mechanic looks like in a controlled environment where people aren't going to die. If this guy did his Astral Shield in the middle of all those trash packs, whenever those shields break, every single one of them is going to shoot out and do damage. Now, generally the rule of thumb here that most people use is if there's 3 or more with a shield on, you need to dodge roll, because if you dodge roll, you won't take any damage. If you hold block, you'll still take damage. And if there's 3 or more, it'll probably still one-shot you. So if there's 2 or less, you can just hold block, you can block cast. If there's 3 or more, you want to dodge roll. And this is really tricky at first, but what you want to do is just keep an eye on that health bar, and when you see the shield getting pretty low, go ahead and just dodge roll. And if you dodge roll too early, go ahead and just dodge roll again. There's a lot of ground dots on the target and a lot of just regular dots as well. So it should still push it as long as you're fairly close. And then don't worry too much if, half the group dies the first couple of times, or if you keep dying halfway through the trial. That was my situation. You'll get it eventually. It's not a big deal. But again, you can just pull them over to the side, and then you only have one shield. The other thing I'll note is that the damage of the shields, whenever they break, is scales off of health. And so the elite ads will do more damage whenever their shield breaks. So if you've got 2 elite ads like we'll have later, and their shield breaks, you just realize it's going to do more damage, and keep that in mind. If you're the raid lead in your group, or you're the one doing call outs, having someone who's more experienced call out when to dodge is definitely a good idea. Call it out early, call it out often, and hopefully your group won't have too much trouble. All right, now the next ad pull here is just a couple of Bloodseekers. I missed the taunt here, but basically one tank taunts right, other tank taunts left, and then you run to the other side and they stack in the middle is the idea. Then all the DPS run up and DPS everything down, and it's not too bad. Now, the next fight here is the last pull before the first boss, and we've got a Reaver, a Soulweaver, and a Bloodseeker. So starting from left to right, we've got the Reaver, Soulweaver, and then Bloodseeker way on the right. So what you want to do is have one of your tanks run up to the right and taunt the Bloodseeker way over there to the right, and then the entire group runs over to the right, and they start DPSing down the Bloodseeker. Now, you're going to see what I'm going to do. I'm going to run up and grab the Soulweaver, who's in the middle there and to the left of the pool, just on the side, and I'm going to taunt that and nothing else. Now, the Reaver is going to run into the group, and as it gets close, our main tank is going to taunt the Reaver and pull it over by the Bloodseeker, and then the group is going to kill those two by themselves. You'll see this strategy repeated over and over again on all the ad strategies here. You basically just pull the Soulweaver out because that Astral Shield is so nasty when there's a bunch of other ads around, so we just want to pull it out and take it out entirely. Now, the other thing the Soulweaver will do, and you saw this earlier, it will create a ground AoE that will kind of grow and then explodes once it gets to the edges, and that's not too bad. It'll happen to random people. You can see it happening again here, and those guys just step out of group, and it's no big deal. It doesn't do that much damage. As long as you don't have multiple ones stacked in one place, it's generally not a big deal. All right, so time for the first boss. A couple of quick notes of things that hopefully everybody already knows, but just as a reminder, make sure that the supports get rezzed first in all of these fights here. It's very important. The supports have, the healers and tanks have very important jobs, and they need to get, if they die, you need to get them up ASAP or it's going to be a party wipe. And for newer groups, you generally don't want to have your healers res. You want to have a DPS doing that. So if you've got someone with quick res, you could even have someone designated. And they could be the person who's like Johnny on the spot with all the reses. That's not a bad idea. So if you've got like a Stamplar or something, a great person to have do that. And then later on, once you get a little more experience, usually the healers res because they've got heals down and nobody's dying. And so they don't necessarily have that important of a job, and getting someone up to do more damage is better than having perfect buff up times. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about positioning to start off with. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have the main tank turn the boss around, basically face the exit door from where he's standing right now. And they're going to hold him basically that same exact spot the entire fight. They're not going to move too much. Then we're going to have our Kite healer over to the left. So if you've got someone using Rojo, typically that's also a Necromancer, and they're going to be in the group. So you'll have someone else, whoever has SPC, over on the left, and they're going to be your Kite healer. And the reason for that is because they can easily still proc Spellpower Cure on the group and be standing over here, and it's not a problem. If you need to do something different because of experience levels with your healers, it's not going to be that big of a deal. The main thing is that the Kite healer stays within ranged attack distance of the boss. He turns and charges whoever is furthest away from him, but closer than 28 meters, which is also the range of your light attacks, your ranged attacks. So as long as your healer over here can still hit the boss and is as far away as they can and still do that, they're going to be in a great spot to make sure that they get charged. And that might take a little getting used to. Now we're going to have our off tank. When the ads come up, we're going to kind of pretend like these pools are squares, and we're going to have them kind of right in the corner, inside the square, but right on the corner. So it should be just right outside of the water. On the corner, closest to the center, is where we want our off tank to hold the ad. If you guys have seen like Outcast website, they have a graphic similar to this, and they have the tank kind of a little bit further away from the boss. I wouldn't put the tank that far away. You want it a little bit closer, similar to the graphic I have here. Now let's go ahead and talk about just general mechanics in this fight. So again, we've already mentioned the charge. He charges whoever's farthest away from him, but still within 28 meters. And I could be off on that by like 2 meters or something here or there, but it's basically 28 meters. Either way, it is your ranged attack range. So as long as you can hit him, you should be good. And he'll do that periodically. The other thing we have to worry about is he will call in an ad at 90%, 75, 50, and 25. So 90%, and then every quarter of his health, he'll summon an ad. And then the last thing he'll do is he'll poison people. He'll poison 2 people in the group. He'll say something like spit melt you away. And 2 people, the edge of your screen will turn green, and you need to go cleanse in the pools. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the pools to the DPS's left and right, so that to the left and right of the exit door. And what you can do if you don't have add-ons and stuff like that, I don't play with mechanic add-ons generally, is that, if you see you're getting poisoned, then you just call out in comms that you're going left or right. And if somebody else accidentally calls the same direction as you, but they're after you, they need to switch. So if I call left, but somebody beat me to it and has already called left, then I know I just need to go right, and nothing else needs to be said. If you're the second person calling the direction and you both called the same direction, just go to the other side. Now, it is important to note that you do drop ground AoEs when you're poisoned. So if you start to go left, but now you have to go right, it's best to run around the group. Don't run straight through the very center of the group, because you're pretty good chance you'll drop a ground AoE right in the middle of them. It's not the end of the world, but it's just one more thing, and it's inconvenient and can lead to people dying. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the individual roles and what people have to worry about now that we've gone over the rough mechanics of the fight. So for the main tank, really, besides the fact that the boss hits pretty hard and you want to make sure that you're blocking a lot and you're maintaining your resources pretty well, really the only mechanic or the only attack besides his heavy that you need to worry about is something called Blistering Smash. So for this, he'll raise both of his hands up in the air and bring them down. You'll also see a circle, a large or medium-sized circle, just to outline, and then it'll start to fill up, and it'll be on the main tank. So it always targets whoever has taunt on him. So whenever you see that, that's him. He'll be raising his hands up, and when he brings them down, the circle should be filled, and that's when the actual mechanic goes off. Now, you can be inside the circle, but dodging when that goes off, and he won't take any damage, and that's totally fine. But whatever happens, you don't want to be inside that circle when it goes off. If you're holding block, well, if you're not holding block, it's it's going to one-shot you. If you are holding block, it's still going to chunk you down to like 10 to 20% health, super low. And if you're taking damage from anything else, or you already weren't maxed out on your HP, it's gonna one-shot you. So whenever you see that ground AoE, that circle, just get out of it. Now, usually it's centered on the tank, and the tank is in front of the boss, and the boss has a decent sized hitbox. So the DPS generally does not have to worry about it, but obviously you guys don't want to get into it. And if you're in it when it goes off, you're gonna be dead. So don't be there. The other thing I would say to a tank is that when this goes off, it's gonna leave a persistent ground AoE, and what you want to do is roll to your left. You want to go to the left. And the reason is that's going to be the same direction that your DPS are going to be when the ad is up. And so if you go to the right, it kind of puts you in a situation where you're closer to midway between your kite healer and the group, and you're holding the boss, right? And so you don't want to be there. You want the boss to be the furthest away from your kite healer and to make that easy on them. So you want to roll to your left. The kite healer might have to scoot up, but again, the idea is that you're making sure that that the kite healer stays the furthest away from the boss, and you're not accidentally moving the boss further away from the DPS than they're expecting. That is something that's kind of subtle, but I notice a lot of tanks doing, and it causes charging groups quite often. And it's not entirely the tank's fault; it's because people are out of position in general. But if you just dodge to your left, you can avoid it. Period. Now, the next thing is for the off tank. Now, whenever the ad comes up, you're going to see a bunch of AoEs dropping on the ground, and this is for the DPS. You guys can just move out of that. They don't do a lot of damage, so you can stand in them if you're in heals, or hold block cast is fine. But if you can't, just move out of them. They don't do a ton of damage, but you might as well avoid it. So just move out of that, and then you'll see a big AoE that'll start to fill up, and that's telling you right in the center of that is where the ad is going to spawn. So you can get lined up on them. You want to stay outside of the AoE if you can, but as soon as he kind of lands, you can either ranged or run up and melee taunt him. It's not too bad. And then after that, you just move into position. You don't need to worry about his light attacks. He doesn't do a whole lot of damage just on regular veteran. It's not too bad. His heavy attack, what he'll do is he'll spin around and then he'll do an overhead chop. Now, when he does that, a bunch of meteors will fall, kind of like when he was first spawning in. There'll be at least 2 in group, I believe, maybe 3, and then 1 will fall directly on the main tank, whoever he's heavy attacking. Off tank. So you should have taunt, and it should fall on you. So in general, keep him turned away facing towards the pool whenever he's going to heavy attack. And then those meteors will fall. You can just step out. If you get hit by those meteors and you're not blocking, you will get knocked down, and that could cause problems and could lead to you dying if you're not careful. So again, make sure that's not in group. Otherwise, you can actually turn this guy kind of any direction. So if you need to move closer to be able to chain in frogs and stuff like that, you can actually turn him towards the group and not have to worry about it too much. It's really just this heavy attack. You don't want to be standing in the middle of the stack whenever he does it, because then it'll cause the ground AoE right in the middle, and everybody will have to move. So again, don't be afraid to move around and chain in those frogs. Now, the other things, other mechanics that he does, none of them are super important. He'll turn around and do like a cleave towards the group. That won't one-shot anybody. So again, there's a lot of things that do a little bit of damage in this, and as long as you don't get hit by all of them, you shouldn't be dying. And as long as you have a lot of heals going down, you should also be fine. And then the last thing that you have to worry about is, I think, called Cinder Cleave. So he'll turn and pick someone in the group, and you'll see a conal going out. And if that happens to you, you want to just stand there and hold block, and everybody else will move out. If you're not sure if it's on you, you can kind of hold block and then move a little bit, wiggle back and forth, and see if the cone moves with you. If you're not sure, or if it seems like it does, just stand there and hold block. It's not going to one-shot you. It's not going to kill you. It's not that big a deal. And then you can keep kind of slowly moving and see if it is indeed on you, or if there's 2 people standing in that cone, then maybe it's the other person, and then you can just dodge roll out. Not a big deal. The main thing you don't want to do, though, is what's called lighthousing, which basically just means like running around like crazy person and swinging that conal attack towards everybody. You don't really want to do that. It just causes extra damage to the group or whatever. So if it targets you, you just stand there and hold block. No big deal. And that's pretty much it for the off tank. Now for the healers. So for the kite healer, it's pretty easy. You're just going to be standing there. Make sure you can see that your light attacks are hitting the boss, so you know you're in range, and then just try to be as far away as you can. And it's not too big a deal. What'll happen is that Oaks will turn. You'll see him turn, and he kind of like gets ready to charge. So you have a decent amount of time. And then his actually charging towards you also takes a bit of time. So what you can do is just dodge roll out of it, and you won't take any damage. and he'll just keep charging to the same place you were whenever you dodge rolled. So whenever he starts his charge, he's locked into wherever he's going. And again, you can dodge roll. You can even dodge roll through him, and as long as you're dodge rolling when he runs through you, you won't take any damage. Now, if you see that he turns towards the group, and the main tank could do this as well, or the raid lead, you guys kind of decide beforehand who's calling it, but the kite healer, the main tank, and the raid lead should all kind of have an idea. The kite healer and the main tank will always be staring at the boss, so they're the best people to call it out. But if you see him turn and face towards the group, you can just call charges bad. And if you're a DPS or a healer and you hear the charge is bad, you need to dodge roll. You don't need to look around. I mean, you don't need to know where it's at. You just need to dodge roll, because probably by the time you are able to look around and figure out where the boss is at, if he's charging towards you or whatever, he's already going to be charged. So, and you'll already be dead on the ground. So if you hear the charge is bad, just remember there's latency and lag and everything else. You just need a dodge roll. And in general, once you get more experience as a group, this won't even kill people, and maybe it'll kill one or two, but I'll show you some video here where most of the group knows what to do. And once you've gotten used to it, of course, we've all ran this, many times, but it's not that big a deal. But just call it out for the group, so hopefully some people can dodge, and not the whole group doesn't get smashed by the boss and didn't even know the attack was coming. Now for the group healer, your job is not too bad here. You just want to make sure that you have plenty of ground hots down. So when everybody is behind the boss and there's no add up, just keep him down there. Shouldn't be a problem. Whenever the group turns to DPS the add, and that's what you want the group to do. So the group is kind of cheated a little bit. The DPS stack is cheated a little bit to the right, but just directly behind the boss. So you don't want to be to the left of his center line. You want to be a little bit to the right. And then when the add comes up, the off tank's going to grab him and bring him to that corner of the pool. And the DPS, all you do is turn around. You don't want to be running around. You don't need to move more towards the center. You just have your back towards the main boss and you're facing the add, and you DPS him from there. The healers will have to move around a little bit, but not a big deal. And then healers, again, the stack doesn't move very much, so just make sure that you're covering the tank or off tank with your heals if you can, but just keep your ground hots down, keep spamming combat prayer, and it shouldn't be a problem at all. Now to DPS. So there's a few things that you can have the DPS do to help everybody else out. And the main one I would actually say is that if you have a DK, like a Zen's DK or a Mag DK or something, and the off tank is having problems chaining in all the frogs. So what happens is when everybody goes and cleanses, it dirties those pools, and then frogs spawn from those pools. So your off tank is going to be chaining those in, and your main tank as they can. However, you can also have, if you have somebody with chains or a warden who can use that warden teleport ability, they can help with that. And I've seen with new groups, you really don't want more than like 4 frogs up at one time, because they do kind of AoE damage. They hit multiple targets, and you'll start seeing people get one-shotted, or people, getting hit by an AoE and then get hit by a couple of frogs and then dying from that. So all these little sources of damage add up. So the easiest way is if you get 4 or more frogs, just make sure you focus them down. Now, when I say focus them down, I don't mean chase after them. If you have a bunch of melee DPS, you don't want them chasing after the frogs, especially if someone cleanses in one of the wrong pools, uses the 2 near the entrance, which you shouldn't be doing. But if that happens, you don't want them running over there, because then you'll get a charge through group. So again, have the tanks chain them in as best they can. It's primarily the off tank's job. If you are on a necromancer and you're running powerful assault, you're going to be struggling really hard to have enough sustain for this. And so you want to make sure you're heavy attacking often to get those resources back. And then you can chain, and you can also use bone armor if you're struggling on stamina to help chain them in as well. Now, if you are a raid lead, what I would recommend when you first come up to this fight is the first thing you want to do, you might mention 1 or 2 mechanics. Just do the pull and let everybody see what everything looks like. And this is general advice that I sometimes don't take, but you should always do this, especially if people are new. Just do a pull and then let everybody see, maybe tell the kite healer where to stand and give a few tips or whatever, but like 30 seconds. And then just pull. Let everybody see what the mechanics look like, see what happens when they get poisoned, see what it means to run into the pools, etc., and they can kind of see what is going on, and that will help out a lot. Now that we've kind of seen what each one of the individual parts looks like, and I know this has been long, let's just go ahead and look at the whole fight real quick, or large sections of the fight. So here we run in, we turn the boss around, we're DPSing him 90%. we start getting the ad spawn in, which happens pretty quick here. You see these ground AoEs, falling, all the meteors. Just move out of them. You kind of do the DPS shuffle. It's not a big deal. DPS, make sure to stay a cheat to the right of the boss. Ad comes in, off tank taunts it, puts it on the corner, and then all the DPS stand in between, more or less, in between the boss and the ad. And then within that, you can kind of move around a little bit, but you want to stay fairly tightly stacked during this. And then DPS the boss. The charge, it's going to come out. As long as you don't hear the charge is bad, it's fine. Sometimes people will call the charges good just to relieve everybody's anxiety about okay, things are going well over there. If for any reason the kite healer dies to anything, you want to make sure that you get over there and get them rezzed as quickly as possible. And that person, whoever goes over there, they're going to be kiting for that phase. They need to keep that in mind. Now, one thing I would strongly recommend, a lot of people, the last ad comes up at 25%, and a lot of times the boss health is at 20%, and a lot of people just want to kill the boss, because if the boss dies, the ad dies. I would strongly recommend, if you're a new group, do not do that. I have seen so many groups wipe at 2 to 5% because they didn't kill the ad, and then something happened. There was a bad charge. It killed some DPS. Whatever. There could be 1,000 things. Somebody didn't cleanse and drops poison in group, and that kills some people. The off tank misses a block and gets one-shotted. Whatever. There's a lot of things that can happen, and then people are down, the ad's loose or whatever, and it leads to a wipe. The safest thing, in my opinion, especially when you're new, is just to DPS the ad down. Now, if you're getting the main boss down to 10% health, 15% health, maybe you would consider at that point, because he's going to die so quickly, staying on him. But at first, while you're new, I would strongly recommend just killing all of the ads and then going back to the boss. And I would say the same thing on the last fight, or on the second boss fight as well. Just kill the ads, get rid of them, because I've seen the off tank die so many times and then wipe the group at 2%. It's just so sad and frustrating. So kill the ad and then go back to the boss, and it's just rinse and repeat everything from there. All right, you've done it. You've gotten past the first boss. Now, the first ad pull here, we're going to have on the right, we're going to have a Reaver and a Soulweaver, and then on the left, we're going to have another Soulweaver. So we're going to do the same tactic we kind of did before, where we pulled the Soulweaver out, but we've got two of them. So pulling both of them out doesn't really help us that much. So what we're going to do is everybody is going to go to the right and is going to tab target the Soulweaver, and you want to make sure you switch to your AoE setups if you've got them, to your trash setups, and you're going to focus down the right Soulweaver. And then once that's done, then you're going to kill the Reaver. Now, the Reaver is going to do his Earthquake, the tank is going to roll towards the group, and the group is just going to back up a little bit, and then that's really all you have to do. Make sure you're tab targeted on the Soulweaver so that they die first. Whenever the shield comes up, chances are there's going to be more than 3 targets shielded. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on that shield on the Soulweaver. And when it gets low, that you're dodge rolling. And then the off tank is going to do what I'm doing here, which is go over to the left and taunt the other Soulweaver and keep it really far from the group. 28 meters is a really long ways, and ideally you're far enough away. Now, our healer comes over to help me out here to send an orb or whatever. Generally, the off tank should be fine. So I was fine over here, and they got kind of one shot from behind while they're running over. So just stay with the group. It's not a big deal. The off tank should be able to sustain themselves just fine over here. They have plenty. They don't take that much damage. It's not a lot of single target damage. It's really only the shields that you have to worry about. And that's pretty much it for this fight. Now, moving on to the next fight here. Now, there's going to be 2 Reavers and a Soulweaver now in this fight. So what we're going to do is off tank is going to grab the Soulweaver, take it way out of group. We're going to run to the other side of that pillar in the center. And then the 2 Reavers, the main tank is going to hold. Now, you want to hold just to the right of the top of the steps where you see OG Pickles at there. And the Soulweaver comes from that always outside there. The 2 Reavers, one of them is walking around and the other one is stationary. And so usually they both come from the right, but you might have one come from the left. Whenever they drop the first Earthquake, don't move yet if you're the main tank. Wait for the second one to drop his Earthquake. Usually it's like a half a second later. And then you roll towards the top of the stairs. And again, the group just kind of backs up a little bit. Not a big deal, and you're through with the fight. Once the 2 Reavers are dead, you just come over here and finish off the Soulweaver, and that's really it. Now, on the next pull here, we've got from right to left, we've got a Soulweaver, a Bloodseeker, and then we have a new target, the Butcher. The Butcher are the two-handed axe-wielding guys. Butchers are pretty tough. So what they do is they do a stomp thing, and then I think it's called like Ignite or something about fire, maybe. I think it's Ignite something, but they'll stomp the ground, and that causes this, you'll see this ground fire AoE, and that puts a huge dot on anybody inside of it. So what you're going to do here is you come up the stairs, you got the Soulweaver on the right, that's what the off tank is going to grab, and then you've got the Bloodseeker, which you could also have the off tank grab. Now, the Bloodseeker, you are going to have to keep interrupted, and you're not going to be able to position perfectly. So you might want to slot something like Crushing or have somebody in the group slot it. But you're just going to run up. Now, when you're taunting the Soulweaver, you need to be careful because it looks like you have clear line of sight, but a lot of that stuff will get in the way, a lot of the furniture and stuff like that. So you really want to make sure you get off the taunt on the Soulweaver and it doesn't accidentally go into group. So you just want to be careful. If you kind of go to the left side of the stairs, it's a little bit easier to get the taunt off on that Soulweaver. And then grab the Bloodseeker and then run to the back. Now, the main tank is pretty much going to pull the Butcher right up to the group and then just turn it away. So you don't really have to move too far, just run in and stab it. And then this is a good chance to test your healers. So ideally one healer should be able to keep the group and everybody alive, even after that stomp, even after the Butcher has done his dot. So if you wanted to, you could send one healer back there with the tank, or they could just not heal, because during the next fight, or I'm sorry, the last ad pull right before the second boss, that's what they're going to need to do. You're going to need a healer who can keep everybody alive by themselves with that big dot on the group. So here's an opportunity to kind of test it out if you want. Now, the next ad pull here is just an ulti pull. So we've got a Reaver and a Bloodseeker. You just grab the Reaver, stack them on top of the Bloodseeker. One tank grabs one tank grabs the other. And then you just want to have everybody light attack until everybody, all 12 people in the group, have full ultimate. Everybody needs full ult. And then what you're going to do for this next ad pull, everybody needs to be slotting Destro ult. And but any kind of like AoE, if they don't have that, if they got some sort of class skill, but you need an AoE ultimate for this, and preferably one that is bigger, takes more ultimate. You know, the Mage's Guild skill line, the Shooting Star or whatever, that would also work. But you want all of your Wardens to take off their bears and to slot Destro ults. You don't want Storm Atro, I don't believe. You want again, you want everybody with a Destro ult. Now, the first thing I would recommend you do, especially if you're new, is you're just going to kill these Durzogs here. So the way this fight is set up, you can't see anybody until you've like ran up the stairs, right? You can kind of see them in the background, but it's pretty hard. So what I would honestly recommend is just doing a pull where all you do is kill the dogs on the stairs. There's one on the right, one on the left, kill it. And then everybody in the group can move up, can walk up the stairs and actually see what they're going to taunt. And that is by far the easiest way. Once you've got up to the top of the stairs, you'll see from right to left in this still here. Back in the background here, we've got another Butcher. You can see him with his two-handed axe. He's sitting down in the back. Then next, kind of in the middle there, casting a spell, is a Soulweaver. And then right in front of me, almost where my character's crosshairs are pointed, is the Reaver. Up to the left there, you'll find the Barbarian. Now, the Barbarian is a new ad. We haven't had to deal with it yet. The main thing it does, besides kind of hits pretty hard, is it'll do like a teleport strike thing where it keeps teleport striking to a different person, random person in the group, and everybody needs to block cast. So what we're going to do for this fight here is we're going to have the off tank. So that's going to be me in this first pull here. I'm going to grab the Soulweaver and I'm going to run up the stairs to the left and I'm going to taunt the Barbarian as it's coming down. Now, it's a little bit tricky here. You don't want to because you're moving and then taunting, you don't want to taunt this guy and then get one shot because you weren't blocking when he attacked, or get chunked down to like 30% health and have to like panic heal. So you really want to be careful that you're holding block, taunt him, dodge roll away, and then once you've dodge rolled, you could even dodge roll twice. You go all the way to the top of the stairs. You can even go into this next room. The main idea is that you get really far away because you don't want those astral shields happening to anybody in the group. And when this guy goes to teleport strike, you don't want him hitting anybody in the group. With the off tank, you're going to send one of the healers over to the left. So one of the healers is going to run up there with him, and they're going to help keep the tank alive with those two ads. It's a little tough to stay alive up there by yourself, so having a healer can be a huge help. That healer, though, before you go up there, if you want, you can throw some heals towards where the group is going to be standing. And what's going to happen is the main tank is basically the stack you want to end up basically where the Soulweaver is at right now. So tell everybody beforehand. You can modify that and do it somewhere different. But generally, we tell the group, okay, we're going to stack all the adds right where the Soulweaver is at now. So the main tank is going to grab the Reaver, and he's going to grab the Butcher coming from the back, and he's going to stack it right there where the Soulweaver is. So all the healers can drop your ground hots ahead of time to make sure that you have them on everybody. Because once the Butcher comes into the fight and he puts that fire dot on everybody, you're going to need to be spamming combat prayer, and you want all your hots already down on the ground. I don't do perfect with my positioning here. I probably could have done a little bit better. And then you're going to see the earthquake happens and the stomp happens, and then the earthquake happens. And then, I should be rolling towards the group and I roll right. So that's my fault. So the main tank needs a ton of heals. Don't worry about buff uptime so much. Just worry about keeping the main tank alive. And then once the Butcher is dead, you kill the Reaver, and then you're pretty much home free from there. After that, you just walk up the stairs, kill the Soulweaver, then kill the Barbarian, and you're good. Everybody runs up the stairs. So that's how you do this fight. And as long as you can get enough DPS to kill that Butcher the first time, to kill him when he comes out, you can get through this ad pull, even if you have to die and res a few times. When you're counting into the fight, when the tank says 2 or 1, depending on how quick your group is, everybody can go ahead and drop their Destro ults in the designated area, because it takes them a couple of seconds before they start doing damage anyways. So doing all those things you can and having the tank count in slowly can have everybody make sure they're pre-buffed, they got everything going on. And then as soon as the actual pull has happened, what you can do, you can have one of your healers go ahead and pop barrier. And if you have it be your SPC healer, they can swap out for Spell Power Cure, and instead of a sustain set, which you're not going to need for a trash pull, you're actually going to swap out and you can put on Saxhleel. And that way when you barrier, you also get the benefit of a Warhorn. And then you want to make sure that you have somebody using Colossus on that Barbarian as well whenever they get them stacked up. And then other than that, having everybody tab targeted onto them to make sure that they're single targeting them and not accidentally hitting one of the other ads, it's very important to getting that ad down. If you see that both ads health is dropping at a similar rate, then you know that you've got some people that aren't tab targeted and aren't on the right target. So make sure everybody is hitting that Barbarian. Once he dies, it's pretty much home free from there. If the whole party wipes, you need to do it again. It's not a big deal, because you can just do it one at a time if you have to. Next target that you really need to worry about is the Soulweaver, so you could keep them down and have the off tank take the Reaver and the Barbarian up the stairs and have a healer go with them. That would be fine, but it's pretty chill after that. It's not too bad. So just count in. Pop a barrier if you need to. Your main tank too, once that bleed happens, if you have a DK tank, that's a perfect time to use Magma Shell. So again, just to kind of go over this one more time, have your off tank grab the Soulweaver and the Barbarian who spawns at the top of the stairs and go up to the top of the stairs into the next room a little bit, just plenty far away. And then everybody else drops all of their AoEs, all of their damage on top of where the Soulweaver was. So the Soulweaver will move, obviously, but that's where you're going to plan to stack everybody. So you can go ahead and drop all your ground dots before the ads are even in place. Healers are dropping all their heal over times. The healer who went up the stairs, you probably, as soon as you're pulled, you want them to barrier, and that'll give you the benefit of sack. So you send your SBC person up there and have them pop barrier. If they don't have Saxhleel, which they might not, still just have them barrier. Have someone horn. You could have your other healer do that, and then have someone use their Colossus, so the off tank or someone else. But you can have your off tank and the healer that are going up the stairs use their ults before they go up there. And then the main tank, your job is just to stay alive. So pick a selfish ultimate if you have it. Have flare on your bar, all your damage mitigation skills, and then just hold block and heal yourself, and that's how you don't die there. And then again, just massive heals. All right, moving on to the second boss. Now, if you made it this far and you did good on that ad pull, go ahead and give yourselves a pat on the back. You did a great job. That ad pull is not a joke, and really neither is the first boss. So on the second boss, this is one where a lot of groups prog, and I imagine a lot of you has skipped to this point already, and you want to hear some advice for this. So I'll do my best here. All right, so the method I recommend is having the off tank. They're going to start with the first ad right here at the entrance. So whenever the first flesh atro comes up, you want to bring him right to the entrance door. Now, the main tank, you want to start near the corner to the left of the entrance. So when you walk in, that corner to your left is where you want to pull the boss to. And the reason for that is we're going to have the main tank kind of in the corner to the off tank's left. And then we're going to have the off tank start by the entrance. And then we're going to have our Kite healer and a Kite DPS kind of in the center. And that way they can make sure they get the curses every time. Now, what will happen is every time a flesh atro comes up, the off tank is going to taunt it, and they're just going to keep layering those AoEs around the outside in kind of an L formation. And the off tank here, both tanks really, but you have a really important job. So what you want to do is as soon as the flesh atro comes up, make sure you get taunt on it, and then run as quickly as you can once you've got taunt and get in position. And you want to stand as close to the previous circle that's been dropped as you possibly can so that they have maximum overlap. Now what happens is as soon as the flesh atro gets up to somebody, he does his heavy attack. And his heavy attack causes that ground AoE when it goes off. So what you do as an off tank, you stand there, he comes to you, he goes to heavy attack, then you dodge roll to your left, and then barely get outside of the circle, and then stop and just turn back towards the boss. And the reason you're doing that is you're trying to move the flesh atro as little as possible, because what the DPS is going to do is they're going to see the flesh atro and they're going to angle their dots a little bit to the right so that when you have to move out of the circle, the flesh atro doesn't have to move very much and he can stay inside of the group's dots. So if you're a DPS, cheat all your dots to the right. So when the tank moves, the ad stays inside of your ground dots. And I know that seems like a minuscule thing, but I promise you it'll help you kill these guys quicker. And what you don't want to happen if you leave the flesh atros up for too long is they'll heavy attack again, and they'll leave another persistent ground dot. Now, if one or two of them do that, it's not that big of a deal, but if every single one does that multiple times, you're going to run out of space around the outside, and you're going to end up with them dropped weird places. Now, I need to warn you as an off tank, these flesh atros are a pain, and there's a bunch of archers that'll be around, and glitchy weird things happen. I've been pointing at a flesh atro and taunted it, and the taunt didn't land, or I thought it did, or he cleansed it, or whatever. You really want to make sure you've got taunt, then run into position, and then double check that, hey, is he coming towards me? You know what? I'm going to go ahead and range taunt him again just to make sure, because you can be pointed at him and somehow it still taunts one of the archers. Sometimes the archers will get in the way and they'll be in front of him, and so you'll taunt an archer instead of the flesh atro and you won't realize it. So just keep that in mind. That can be a little screwy. If he gets loose and you see the flesh atro and you get a couple of these big ground AoEs right in the center, I would honestly recommend if you're new and it's early in the fight, probably just wipe, reset it, because that's going to cause so many problems later on and you're already learning and everything else is already so difficult. Just wipe and just get a fresh start and don't worry too much about it. Now for the off tank, whenever you're getting attacked, you need to realize that bleeds are going to be put on you. And so when you have those atros up, you're really going to need to be healing yourself quite a bit. The other thing that you guys want to make sure that you do is whenever the atros or any of the ads are up, you're dropping ults. So you use horns, Colossus, etc. So if you can, you want to make sure that at least one horn or Colossus, if not both, is going off on the flesh atros every time they come up, because you want them to die as quickly as possible, and that's the best way to do it. Now, for the main tank, what you're going to do here is every time a flesh atro comes up, you want to move a little bit more to your left. Just far enough that you keep the same distance between yourself and the off tank. And the reason you're doing that is because you're constantly going to be being cursed throughout this entire fight. And so you want to be far enough away that when your curses go off, the group has plenty of time to react. So if you have a curse, once you get cursed, after 8 seconds, you'll blow up. You'll send out these 2 ground AoEs that will move in random directions. Sometimes they don't go towards the group, and that's awesome and it's great. Sometimes they head straight for them or the off tank. So you don't want to be too close so that you can call, curse towards group and let them know that they need to do something. Now, when you're calling curses in this trial, and this goes for everybody, particularly for the Kite healer and DPS and the main tank, you want to call the direction. And honestly, after a while, you don't even need to call curse. You can just say from the right, from the tank, or from behind. And that lets everybody know the direction that the curse is coming from. And the reason you want to do that, particularly from behind, is because when you're DPSing in one direction, you can't see curses sneaking up on you from behind. And it's not always easy to see them coming from the right or left either. So again, just call it out, call the direction, and that way people know. And you can see throughout this fight, if you're a main tank, the positioning that Pickles does here is really good. He does a really great job of staying close, but not too close. And the idea here is that there's a triangle between the 2 tanks and the Kite healer and Kite DPS. And the idea is that the 2 tanks are closer to each other than they are at any time to the Kite healer and Kite DPS. And if you do that, then that will guarantee that the Kite healer and Kite DPS are always getting cursed and not anybody else in the group. Now, as a main tank, It is very important. Your struggle here is just to stay alive. When you're cursed, you take a significant amount of damage. So what I would recommend is when you're not cursed and things are going okay, make sure that you're topping off your resources, heavy attacking as much as you can, and just trying to get your resources back. Once you are cursed, you really just need to make sure that you're healing absolutely as much as possible. You could also go check out TC Lee's from the Tankk Club. He's done a tanking guide on this that I think is I think he updated it now that you can't just vape. But the idea here is that you just try to stay alive as best you can. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Kite healer and the Kite DPS. So you're going to stand pretty much in the center of the arena, more or less, the entire fight. So the healer, what I recommend as a raid lead is I tell the Kite healer to go ahead and drop some ground AoEs before the fight so everybody can see what they look like. You would think everybody would know, but you would actually be surprised, particularly if you have like a necromancer, because like one of their ground heals looks like a giant skull, and it doesn't look like something you want to stand in. So I would recommend strongly you have them drop whatever ground AoEs they have. They can see, the flowers if they're a warden. They can see the glow if they're a Templar, etc., etc. And that will let everybody know, everybody who gets cursed and they need to come back and stand in heals. It lets them know, and it lets the Kite DPS know where they need to stand to be in heals. Other than that, as the Kite healer, your job is to stay alive and try to keep all the DPS that get cursed and have to run back to you, try to keep them alive. An important note here is that if you get cursed the same time as somebody else, when your curses go off, when they explode and go to pass to somebody else, you'll be immune for like a second or two. And so you guys can actually stand really close together and don't need to worry about recursing each other. After a second or two, you can be cursed again. And you can be cursed a second time if you're already cursed and it re-ups the time and does more damage and etc. So you want to be careful for that. Now, as the Kite DPS, your job is just to stay alive. That's your main job. And then your secondary job is to DPS the archers that are around. Now, you can have your off-tank chain in the archers when they don't have an ad, and that's totally fine. It's a good thing to do. They probably don't have much else going on. But even if they can't do that or don't want to do that, they're new, whatever, you can still just have your Kite DPS just range attack and kill those ads. Oh, I think I forgot to mention. Now, when you get cursed and you're the Kite healer or the Kite DPS, what happens is a Lich Crystal like spawns on top of you, and then there's an AoE. You need to dodge roll out of that as quickly as possible because that will blow up and that will kill you. So the Lich Crystal pops up, go ahead and dodge roll out of that. And then after that, it's just worry about staying alive. Now, if you're the DPS, you can definitely spam your shield and that will keep you alive. You actually don't even need heals, but I do recommend just play it safe and stand in heals anyways. Now let's go ahead and talk about the group healer. Now the group healer has a pretty tough job, and you probably want your most experienced healer being the group healer in this fight, in my opinion. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that at all times you have at least 2 HOTS up on the main tank at all times. So typically what I recommend is running radiating regeneration for one of those HOTS, and then you could drop like a ground HOT. And you need to let the main tank know what that looks like and make sure you guys need to communicate. If he or she keeps moving out of that heal, or maybe you're placing it in the wrong place or just whatever, just communicate, try to be cordial and just figure out, hey, the main tank, maybe you tell them, hey, you keep moving out of my heals. And they're like, well, I'm too close to the off tank. You need to put them further away. Just communicate, figure it out. And it shouldn't be a problem after a pull or two. So again, keep 2 HOTS at all times on the main tank, no matter what. And then when the ads come up, what I would recommend, you can use combat prayer, and it goes a long way in a straight line. And you can actually combat prayer the group and still hit the off tank, and that will be enough to keep the off tank alive, unless they're just taking way too much damage. But in general, that should be enough. And if it's not, then you probably have a different issue. Now, if you can throw an extra, like a third heal on the main tank and maybe throw another HOT on the off tank, that's a great idea. You should absolutely do that. 100% I would recommend doing it. And then if, you could also have your Kite healer use radiating regeneration as well. And you got to use it a couple of times to get most of the group, but that can also be a huge help to everybody. Because again, our goal here is to get a clear, is not to look pretty or show everybody how awesome we are and how we can, do this in some short amount of time. All right, now let's talk about DPS. So now as a DPS, you stand behind the boss and you DPS them. But one thing I see happen far too often is that people stand too close to the boss. The main tank is going to continually be cursed throughout the entire fight, and there's nothing they can do about it. And when those curses go off, if one of them goes directly towards the group and you're standing right beside the boss, you're going to get hit. And when you get hit by a curse, what happens is you blow up, or the curse blows up, and it will one-shot everybody around you, and then it will curse you. So you'll stay alive to kill more people, but you'll have killed like half your group. So obviously no one wants to do that. And if you ever find yourself cursed and standing in the middle of a bunch of dead bodies, you probably killed all your friends. So it's an unfortunate fact of this trial. That's just the way it works. So as always, you want to try to, if you're melee, you want to make sure that you're DPSing for maximum melee range as far as you can and still target the boss or the ad, whichever one it happens to be. If you're not a melee DPS, then I recommend standing a little bit further back. You don't want to stand too far because then you get, you push your healer back, and then your healer is standing too close to the Kite healer and the Kite DPS, and they can get hit from behind. But there's plenty of room there. You can still stand at like 8 or 10 meters and be totally fine. If you have a DK in the group, they can DPS from 7 meters instead of 5. And so that can also be like a good idea. Okay, I'll just stand right behind the Zen's DK. And that kind of tells me where I need to be. Now, if a curse does go off and is coming towards you, there's a couple things you can do. First off, you can obviously just run away from it, and that's totally fine. The other thing, the kind of high risk, high reward strategy is actually to dodge roll through it. So when you're dodge rolling, the curses will not hit you. And that keeps it from kind of accidentally tracking and following you when you're running away. And then you can immediately go back to whatever you were doing before. So that's the high risk, high reward strategy. The other way is just to just run away, move away. Now, if you do happen to get cursed, there's 2 ways of handling this, and the group and the raid lead needs to decide this beforehand. But the way I would recommend is that if you get cursed, you just go stand back in the heals that the Kite healer is dropping on the ground at the back of the group. And again, you should know what those look like. And then everybody should also have a shield slotted for this, so you can just spam your shield. The other way of dealing with this is to have the DPS, anybody who gets cursed that's not supposed to, go stand to the kind of the left of the group, kind of in a corner or just far out of the way. Now, you don't want to stand so far from the boss that you're farther than the Kite DPS, because then you'll just get cursed again with the Lich Crystals. But you just go stand to the left, way out of group, or as far out of group as you can, and then spam your shield, and it'll actually keep you alive. So that's another option that you can do. And sometimes you'll just probably need to do that as well. Like you'll get cursed, and you won't really be able to run back to the healer if it's later on in the fight and things really went wrong. And so you might just kind of have to go stand as far away as you can from the group and spam your shield. And you can actually keep yourself alive that way. So don't think that it's the Kite healer's job to entirely keep you alive. Although if you have a couple of healers using radiating regen and you're using your shield, you shouldn't have much of a problem. So that's it for the first part of the fight. So just to again re-emphasize, I'm sure you guys already know if you've ever tried this trial, but the main thing that kills people here is the curses. So you really don't want to be passing out the curses. And one way you can also help a new group learn quickly is you could do a pull and just put the boss in the corner, have a healer on him, and then don't do any DPS. And you can have the different groups go and get the Lich Crystals spawned on them, be the person furthest away so they get cursed, see what the curses look like when they blow up. You could even just have fun with it and tell people to try and kill each other by cursing other people. And everybody can dodge roll and kind of see, okay, this is what the curses look like. This is what it looks like when you get hit by them. This is what it looks like. This is how much damage you take. This is how many times you have to use a shield, et cetera, et cetera. And all those things will help the group get familiar with it. Then you can really try to actually clear, on the future pulls. But that lets everybody see what the curses are, what they look like, what they do, and not have to worry about DPSing. The other thing is I would really encourage the DPS that it is not a DPS race. If people get cursed and curse other people, people are going to be dead on the ground. And that is going to be so much bigger of a DPS loss than you being distracted and watching out for the curses. So again, just try to avoid the curses if at all possible. Now, there are a couple more things on this fight. So let's go ahead and talk through it again just from the top. So we've pulled the boss, we pulled him to the corner. We've DPS'd them. Our Kite healer and Kite DPS are pretty much in the center of the arena. They get the curses like they're supposed to. Everything's going fine. The Kite DPS is focusing down the archers when they spawn. Oh, this brings me to one other mechanic that I forgot to mention. The archers will cause AoEs to spawn on different people in groups, and it'll start to fill up. And once it fills up, that's when the AoE goes off. Now that will knock you down, and it will knock anybody inside of that circle down when it goes off. It doesn't do that much damage, but it stuns you and it knocks you down, and that's usually what kills people. So how you can avoid that is simply dodge rolling when it's about to go off. So if it's centered on you and you dodge roll when it's about to go off, it will have no effect on you or anybody else, even if they're also inside of that AoE. So you can just dodge roll those and you don't have to worry about it. And that's what most groups do. And that's what I would recommend you guys do. Otherwise, you have to try to interrupt all those archers and it's kind of an impossible task, especially for new groups. Okay, so now let's go back to the top. So we've pulled the boss close to the corner. We started DPSing him. We have to go down to 90%. We're holding all of our ultimates, remember, because we're holding it for the ads. Then at 90%, our first Atro spawns. Everybody needs to immediately stop DPS on the main boss. You do not want to push him to 85% and get a second Atro up. So everybody stops DPS on the boss, even if you have to stand around for a second. But in general, you can turn and go ahead and use your spammable on the ad while it's being put into position. Once the Atro spawns, the off tank is going to go ahead and taunt it. They're going to run right to the entrance. He's going to come up to him. He's going to start to heavy attack. Off tank is going to roll to the off tank's left towards the main tank, get just to the edge, just outside of that AoE, and then they're going to stop and turn around and face that ad again. During this phase, you're going to make sure you're healing yourself quite a bit because you're going to have the dot on you. Now, as soon as that ad gets into position and starts to heavy attack, that's when you go ahead and drop your Colossus. That's when you go ahead and Warhorn. And then the group just DPSs him down. Once the ad goes down, everybody gets back on the boss, and it's rinse and repeat. Now, if you have people die to curses, so maybe a curse went off in group, half the group died, you want to get the ad down as quickly as you can. So if you've only lost a couple of people, just focus down the ad. If you've lost most of the group or most of the group DPS, you want to just go ahead and res everybody you can as quickly as you can, and just realize that the Flesh Atro is probably going to heavy attack a second time and drop a second ground dot. You can do that once or twice and be okay. You just can't do it on every Atro. So then once everybody else is up, if they died, you DPS down the ad and kill them that way. Now, once the ad is down, I would highly recommend making sure everybody is alive. So don't DPS the boss, don't push up another Atro yet, make sure you get everybody alive. And you can pretty much do this throughout the entire pull on this boss. If people are dead, you don't DPS the boss at all, and everybody gets reses. Once the reses are up, then you can go back to DPSing the boss, because you don't want an ad coming up when you have several DPS dead and several other DPS that instead of DPSing the ad are having to res the dead. You go back to the main boss after that, push him till you get another ad, DPS down that ad, and again, rinse and repeat. Now, once the main tank gets opposite the entrance, that's where I would recommend you leave the boss for the rest of the fight. And if you still have Atros coming up, what you can do is just stack them start on the opposite side of the boss. So instead of being to the main tank's right, you'll be to the main tank's left, and just go on the other side of the Oblivion portal. So that's where you can stack if you have additional ads, or honestly, you can stack them anywhere, but you just want to make sure that they are out of the group and that they're away, and that you don't mess too much with the Kite healer and the Kite DPS, but being too far away from the main boss. Now at 60%, that's when the last ad spawns, the last Flesh Atro rather. And then after that, you're not going to have any ads for a little bit until 50%. Now, at that point, 50%, I believe you're going to start getting fire behemoths, and they spawn out of the Oblivion portal. And you can just have your off tank rather stand near the Oblivion portal, and they just taunt them as soon as they come in, and then hold them right there. So you should be about the same distance you were holding the Flesh Atros from the main tank. So it's a good distance. And then the group just turns to the right, DPSs down the fire behemoths. The fire behemoths hit pretty hard and do put a dot on. So it's kind of the same deal for the off tank. You just need to make sure you're staying alive. You need to make sure you're getting heals from the group healer. And then the DPS needs to make sure that they're focusing him down. Now, when he dies, he'll do an AoE, and that'll explode and that'll kill you. So you want to make sure you're outside of that AoE when the fire behemoth dies. And that's usually not too hard. And after this, it's just kind of rinse and repeat. There will be ghosts that spawn on the second part of the fight, and you can have your Kite DPS help with those. And then if the group ever doesn't have anything to do, if they're waiting on reses or whatever, they can help kill the ghosts as well. And then at 25%, what's going to happen is meteors are going to start spawning, or suns. And you'll get a warning on those. Usually there's an audio cue. It doesn't always work, but you always get a visual cue. So you'll see a hollow circle, just like a ring appear, like an AoE on the ground, and the sun will spawn in the center of that. What you want to do when that happens, everybody needs to turn and DPS it, because you have like 8 or 10 seconds to kill that sun, or it explodes and will one-shot everybody in the group. So it's a party wipe mechanic. So when the suns come up, or the meteors, whatever you want to call it, everybody needs to turn and focus them. Now, the other thing is that they die very quickly. So if you, as long as not more than half your group is melee, The melee people can stay on whatever they want. They can keep DPSing the ad if that's what you're on, or the boss if that's what you're working on. And it can just be the range people that can turn and focus it down. Now, if you've got more than half the group is melee, or you got a bunch of people dead, then you might need everybody to focus down the sun. So when the suns come up, make sure that you tell other people, if you're the raid lead, like, hey, if anybody sees the sun come up and I haven't called it, please call for it. Okay. You really want to make sure that everybody's on it. If it spawns really far from the group, or if it spawns in the opposite corner from the boss, way behind the Kite healer and Kite DPS, what you want to do is everybody needs to DPS it from maximum range. Okay. You don't need to run up to the sun. And if it's close to the group, you don't even need to move. And the reason for that is if you start spreading out and some people charge it, some people don't, there's a lot of passive damage that goes on in here. And you can die because you're not in heals. So you need to stay grouped up. And the best way to do that is to make sure you DPS from maximum range. So only move as close to it as you can. And then the other thing, again, you only need to use your spammables because it will die in seconds. It'll die really quickly. You don't need to do a full rotation on it. You don't even have time. Just hit it with your spammable and it'll die pretty quickly. And then once the sun is dead, you go back to the ad or the main boss, whichever is up, and rinse and repeat. Everything else is the same. A lot of times when the suns come up, people get a little hyped. You might need to calm people down, but people get a little crazy. Just be like, hey, this is really simple. We're just doing the same thing. We just got one more thing we got to do now. We just kill this, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you don't want to leave the ads up too much because those fire behemoths will kill your off tank. The other thing, just like the first fight, I would strongly, strongly recommend, especially to new groups, make sure you kill all of the ads and then kill the boss. Don't try to leave the last ad up and kill the boss. I've seen so many groups wipe at 2%, and it's soul crushing. Okay, just kill the ads when they're up, and then go back to the boss in almost all situations. I would just say in all situations until you know when it's right to make the call not to do that. And that's it for this fight. So I know that's a lot. This is one of the hardest fights in the game right now. So it does take a while. The main thing is keeping people from dying to curses. If you need to, play a little mini game. Don't DPS the boss. Let everybody see what the curses are like. And you could even do that a couple of times so that people aren't cursing everybody in the group, because that's the main thing. Now, the other thing is if you have one person who is consistently killing the group, you might need to make a change. So you could maybe have them be the Kite DPS, so they're way out of group, or something else. Usually, in my experience, those situations are because somebody has like poor internet, and so they don't see the curse hitting them, and it's hitting them and killing everybody else in the group. But you could even have them stand outside of group, or I guess at the worst case scenario, you might have to swap somebody out. In general, I can tell you that person doesn't want to be dying. So I would ask that you be kind to people and realize that, hey, everybody's doing the best they can. The other thing I would say is sometimes the person causing all the problems does, because they're not dying, they don't realize that they're the problem. So just be kind, but be clear with people like, hey, just so you know, you got 3 of the last 4 curses. Okay. So, this is what they look like. Please don't worry about DPS. Just make sure you're not getting cursed. And usually if you do that, sometimes they don't know and they'll be like, oh, I didn't realize. Everybody else died. I thought I was the one doing the right thing or something else. You never know. But people get confused. But just be kind, explain it to them, and then ask them to focus on just not getting cursed and not killing the group, because that will get you through. Even if they do 0 DPS, if they're not at least killing other people, that's better than if they're doing DPS but killing several people every time the curses go out. And again, be direct, tell people, but also try to be kind. All right, so next up, these next ads between here and the Ash Titan are actually pretty easy. So you do want to pull this Sun Eater. The Sun Eater spawns suns, and so you kind of want to pull it towards the group, because if you leave him where he's at, he'll actually spawn a sun like in a weird spot most often. And so if you pull him towards the group, the sun will spawn at a better location. It's easier to kill. And then you still need to focus down the sun because it will wipe the group still. And then you can go back to the Sun Eater. And then once he's dead, you kill the Barbarian. The easiest way to do this first ad pull is to have one of the tanks hold. I'm sorry, I said Barbarian. I mean Butcher. Is to have one of the tanks hold the Butcher way outside of the group and have one of the healers focus him, or alternatively, just stack it all together and make sure the healers have a lot of hots going down, and you can heal through the Butcher's dot, and it's not too bad since you have both healers there. After that, I'm not going to go through all these ad pulls. They're pretty easy. One tank grabs one big ad, the other tank grabs the other big ad. You stack them, you burn. It's not too bad. Now, eventually you get to the Ash Titan. So the Ash Titan is a little tricky here. So what I would recommend, again, we're just trying to get a clear. This is a new group. So you've got a Sun Eater on the left, and then you've got the Barbarian on the right. And the Barbarian is melee, the Sun Eater is actually ranged. And then you've got the Ash Titan. So I'd recommend is make sure that you've got an ulti with the ad pulls leading up to this, so everybody can ultimate on this pull. And then what I would do is have the main tank go up, taunt the Ash Titan, turn it around, and then they're just kind of hanging out, keeping themselves alive. Everybody else runs to the left and attacks the Sun Eater, and the off tank will also grab the Barbarian, will range taunt the Barbarian as he's running towards the Sun Eater. And then everybody DPSs, drops the ultimates on the Sun Eater. Make sure someone's horning, make sure someone's using their Colossus, and make sure everybody else is using their Destro ult. Now, when the sun spawns, you do need to turn and kill it because it's the first priority because it'll wipe the group. Once the sun's done, then you go back to the Sun Eater, keep DPSing him down. Hopefully, about this time, it will die. Now, about that same time that the Sun Eater usually dies, and this is in lower DPS groups, the Barbarian starts doing his teleport strike thing. So you'll need a block cast. And then also the Ash Titan will start summoning its Meteors. And that's usually cause for a wipe. So really, the first pull, all you're trying to do is kill the Sun Eater. Once the Sun Eater's dead, then the next pull, you can kill the Barbarian, either by itself or by stacking it on top of the Ash Titan. And then once that's dead, then you focus on the Ash Titan. So basically, you're doing anywhere from 2 to 3 pulls. And the first 1 or 2 pulls is just to kill the ads, starting with the Sun Eater and then going to the Barbarian. I know it's not pretty, but it's the easiest way to get through this. The main mechanic with the Ash Titan is that he will summon meteors that will fall down, and there's 2 kinds of meteors that he causes. So the first kind are ground AoEs, and they're centered on a particular location, and they're static. They're a little bit larger than the other meteors as well. Those larger ground AoEs will one-shot you. Those are the ones you absolutely have to get out of the ground AoEs. There's other AoEs that will be centered on individuals, and will follow them kind of wherever they go, and there's not really a way to avoid them besides dodge rolling at the right time. And those don't hit nearly as hard. So it's the ground AoEs you really need to avoid, and then the ones that are centered on individuals don't hit as hard. So what you want to do for this fight, before you've even pulled, have everybody arrange in a semicircle, just like you would for Veteran Asylum Sanctorum. Everybody has kind of their lane, and you get near the boss, and then once the meteor phase happens, then you kind of walk backwards to get out of those AoEs. Now, the further you are from the Ash Titan, the more damage you will take. So you do need a kite relatively close to the Ash Titan, but you will kind of have a lane. So you just walk backwards, then cut left or right a little bit, and then walk back in, and you kind of do a little box, little square dance. During that phase also, you want to use pop shields, hold block when you can, and then dodge roll. So block, dodge roll, and shield. Between all 3 of those things, if you don't get hit by one of the stationary ground AoEs, you can survive. And it's tricky at first. At first, it's just a huge res prog, so a lot of people will die. In between meteor phases, you have time to res 2 people, okay? So keep that in mind. If you survive, you have time to res 2 people, and then the next meteor phase will start to happen again. So for this, honestly, it's kind of like Edge of Tomorrow, live, die, repeat. Like you'll just have to die, res people. It's just a res prog, but you'll eventually get through the Ash Titan. It's not too bad after that. And then after that, we are to the last boss, Xalvakka. So Xalvakka is actually not too bad if you've got to this point. Xalvakka's main mechanics that you have to worry about, if you're the main tank, she does a heavy attack. It's a channeled heavy attack similar to like the warrior. There are 4 parts to the attack, 4 heavy attacks that she takes at you, and they're kind of spaced in a weird, it's like 1 attack, long wait, 2 rapid attacks, then kind of a wait, and then the 4th attack. So it's kind of weird, but once you've tanked it a little bit, you'll get used to it. I would highly recommend as a main tank, you want to dodge at least one of those swipes because it hits so hard, and make sure you're healing for the ones that you're face tanking. You can dodge roll them. It's not too bad. If you can dodge 2, then you're in a good spot, because if you can dodge 2, you won't take that much damage. So to start off here, we just pull, we leave her right in the center, turn her away from the group. She'll do her heavy attacks, main tank will dodge. As the off tank, a bunch of ads spawn. And what you want to do is just taunt them all. And what I would recommend is stacking them just right behind the main tank. Just put them all there. And what will happen is all the group is cleaving and doing all their walls and everything. And so that's a great spot to have them out of group, but still getting plenty of cleave. And they should die pretty fast. Now, there will also be ghosts that spawn. Now, one of the ads that will come up is a Iron Atro, and the Iron Atro will do this mechanic where it makes everything around it in a small radius. It like does a bunch of damage, a big AoE there. And the main tank, if you stack that right behind the main tank is going to have to move. But honestly, it's not that big a deal. Just have the main tank move to the side and leave that Atro in the cleave from the group. And the main tank can turn the boss without actually having to move her. Now, the other thing that will happen here is that ghosts will spawn at the outside of the arena, and they'll slowly make their way towards Xalvakka. And Xalvakka will teleport at some point if she's up for too long, and you might have to move. But again, the ghosts head towards her. If they reach her, they will give her a shield and also empower her. If too many ghosts reach her, the shield will be too big, and you won't be able to DPS it down, and she'll start killing people because she gets enraged. Generally, the ghosts die to AoE, but if you have a group with really low DPS, or if you have a lot of stamina, which have less AoE damage, then you could have a problem. What I would recommend in that situation is that you just try to focus the ghost down if you can. If you're still not really able to, or you're able to focus the ghost down, but then Xalvakka's health isn't moving, it probably just means that your group DPS is too low. And probably if it's too low for this, you've had problems the entire trial. So it might be the case where really you need people to go practice parsing and then come back when they have the DPS for this trial. And I know that might sound harsh, but I mean, that's just the way the trial's set up. So don't be mad at me, I guess. But anyways, kill the ghost before they get to her so she doesn't get a shield, and then just DPS her. Now, the last thing that you really have to worry about here, besides the ads, is that when the ghosts die, they cause something called Soul Purge, and it's a synergy. You'll see a Soul Purge synergy pop up, and your character will also be slower, or might be barely able to move. You do not want to purge. You do not want to use that synergy in group. You want to dodge roll out of group, away from the exit, and then use it, because what it does is it drops these boogers on the ground. And eventually they'll form up and create another ad that you have to kill. But if you drop it in group, it'll slow somebody else down, and it'll put the dot on them. And so that causes problems. So make sure you drop those outside of group. Now at 70%, she will take off and move to the next level. So when you get near 70%, you all need to be ready. Give everybody a warning. They need to be ready to run towards the exit and get across the bridge, because what happens is the lava comes up. Now, if you ran this on normal a lot, the lava is really slow. On veteran and then on hard mode, it gets faster each time. So it's very important that you get 70%. As soon as you see her take off, everybody takes off with her. You don't want to be rezzing when that happens. If you're starting to res, you need to stop it. Just leave the person. You can res them on the next level and just run towards the bridge, because if you try to res them, you're probably both going to die. So once the barrier comes down and you can actually go across the bridge, you sprint across. If you've got somebody running rapids, that can be helpful here, like an off tank, or if you have a Nightblade, as long as they're throwing down the refreshing path, that should be enough as well. Once you get to the stairwell, you can take your time. You can go up the stairwell as slow as you want, pretty much. Have a healer, one of the healers designated before the pull, to be the one who goes up last, and they're going to follow behind everybody and make sure nobody dies. If you're running up the stairs and you take too much damage, and this includes tanks because it scales off your max health, all you got to do is stop. Just stop and wait, and the last healer that's bringing up the rear will come up and will heal you up, and then you guys can continue up the tower. Again, take as much time as you need. Now, once you get to the top, I recommend not running out and running across the bridge. That starts the next phase of the fight. Just get up at the top, get everybody stacked up, and all run out together. That way, when the ground AoEs fall, the meteors and stuff fall from the sky, it hits fewer people that way, because you're all in a stack, hopefully. And you can also assign people to res. If you've got a few people dead, they'll appear at the top of the stairs at the other side of the bridge, and designate one of the healers, probably the person who came up last, the healer that came up at the very back of the group. They can also drop heals for the people that are trying to res, because they will get hit by AoEs and will take some damage. So just have one of your healers keep the people that are trying to res healed up, and have the other one go with the group. Now, on the second floor, again, the off tank, you'll have a lot of ads come up. You just want to taunt them, pull them into group, stack them just behind the main tank, opposite the DPS. Now, what she'll do on this level is she will cause the entire floor to become fire, and it'll cause damage over time to everybody. And she'll also split into 3 parts, and 2 of them are illusions. So what you want to do during this phase, again, this is a place where people panic for no reason. Well, they panic because there's fire everywhere, and that's scary, and that's understandable. But what you want to have everybody do is go stand in the very center. And the reason for that is because then the healers know where to heal. So the healers are going to drop all their heals in the very center. Everybody's going to go stack up in the very center. And then the 2 tanks, because they're not going to take very much damage from this damage over time, they're going to each run up to a different image of Xalvakka. And if it turns transparent, then you know it's not the real one. And if yours is the real one, then you can call for it and then start jumping up and down until, hey, it's on me, and jump up and down, and people will turn and DPS that one. If neither of the tanks, if they both have illusions, then you know it's the third one. And once you get used to it, you can figure out which one is the boss in like 2 seconds. Pretty quick. But even if you don't, even if it takes you a little bit longer than that, even if you do, it's not a big deal because you'll still have plenty of time. So then you figure out which one isn't the illusion, you DPS it down, eventually that phase will end, and then you go back to DPSing Xalvakka. Now, one of the things you might have here is that there is another humanoid ad. I believe it's called a something Goliath that will spawn. It might even spawn on the first floor, honestly, if you take long enough, I believe. But what this ad does is it does kind of the opposite of the Fire Atro, where the Fire Atro has an AoE centered on it. This one creates a ring of fire, but the area nearest it and the area very far away are both safe. So there's 2 ways to deal with this ad. If you have close to enough DPS to move to the next level, then what you want to do is which is 40% health, Xalvakka will move to the next level. So if you're close to that mark, you could just taunt this guy as an off tank and keep him way out of group, and you don't have to worry about it. The other way you could deal with it is pull him way out of group, let his mechanic go off, stand close to him when that happens, and then after that, pull him right into the group and let him die to cleave. The other way to do it is just immediately taunt him and put him right in front of the DPS. But that's a little bit more tricky because if you have other ads up and other things are going on, it can be a problem. So I'd probably just pull him way out of group. And if you have enough DPS, you won't even have to worry about this guy. You can pull him out of group every time. Everything else on this floor is rinse and repeat. And then at 40%, she'll run to the 3rd level. And again, same deal. Everybody needs to try to get across the bridge absolutely as fast as possible so that everybody's kept alive. Once you get across the bridge, then you run up the stairs, take your time. One healer follows behind and make sure no one dies. Get up to the top, wait for everybody to group up. Then you run out together. Now on the 3rd floor, the center is not there and it's a hole and you can fall in and die. So you got to be careful there. But everything else is pretty much the same. She will summon meteors on this floor. They're not called meteors, they're called something else, but there'll be some ground AoEs that happen, and it'll be kind of like a phase where she calls down a bunch of them. You really need a dodge roll and just DPS shuffle to get out of those. You can get hit by one, but usually the second one and certainly the third one will kill you. So you really need to be careful, and that includes tanks. It hits you hard enough that 2 hits will kill you. So dodge roll, keep moving. If you're dodge rolling when it goes off, it won't do damage to you. So that's one way to avoid it, and then just otherwise move out of those AoEs. Healers should be healing quite a bit during all of these phases, but particularly on the 3rd floor. And then you just DPS the boss. Tankk keeps her turned away from the group. You'll still have to deal with her heavy attacks, which you dodge roll, so make sure you don't accidentally dodge roll to the center, because then you can go off the side. And then she'll do the same thing where she causes the entire floor to become fire, and she'll split into 3 parts. Now, there's a lot of different ways of doing this. Again, the simplest and the best way that I would recommend for a new group is that when the fire happens, everybody groups up, okay? And if you're the raid lead, say, hey, group up, group up, group up, and then have chosen a direction beforehand or call it out now. I'd probably just choose it beforehand, and everybody runs clockwise or counterclockwise. And you run to each image of Xalvakka, see if it's the real one, and if it's not, you keep running. Even if Xalvakka is like the furthest one away, like you run almost a complete circle before you get to the real Xalvakka, you're still going to have enough time to DPS her down. I promise you. And most of the time that won't happen. And the reason that you want everybody to group up and then everybody to run around the circle together is so the healers can follow behind and make sure that they're combat praying and keeping everybody alive. So if you're at the front of the group and you start to die, you need to just stop and wait for the rest of the group. And then the healers just run behind. If anybody gets too far behind, one of the healers needs to stop, wait for him, and then again, just move as a group. The main thing here is that nobody panics, that everybody keeps it calm, stays together, and it's not that hard if you do that. It's really not. So just make sure you stay together, move as a group, move around the outside. Hopefully you should only have to do this once or twice during this phase, and then Xalvakka will be dead. Now, on this floor, you will absolutely get that humanoid ad that I mentioned earlier. And what I would recommend is while you stack all the other ads, that particular one, pull him way out of group. He'll do his fire ring thing, wait for that to happen, and then once it goes off, then bring him into the group as quickly as you can and let everybody cleave him down. If Xalvakka is almost dead, I would probably just leave him up and not worry about him and just keep him out of group and just kill Xalvakka. Now, if Xalvakka still has a fair amount of health left, then you are going to need to kill the ad. Another thing about just this whole fight in general is that if you have low DPS, I do recommend focusing down the ads. That's probably the safest way to do it and will probably have the best results for you. But that is it for the basic guide. So I hope that was helpful. And I think that's pretty much it as far as advice. I will give one other piece, and that is I would strongly recommend try to keep things positive. Try to keep things lighthearted. Try to have fun. And the reason I say that is obviously that's just a more fun way to play the game and whatever. But if you're just trying to get it clear, people work better when they are happy and when they're in an environment of approval, when they feel like, hey, I'm doing a good job, or even if I'm struggling with something, like, the rest of my team is still rooting for me. When people start getting negative and start blaming people and stuff like that, it's demoralizing and people will start to perform much, much worse. So if you want to get the best out of your raid group, try to keep things positive, try to keep things light, and try to make sure everybody has fun, because that's the whole point of playing the game anyways, right? So anyways, that's it for this video, guys. If you stuck around and watched all of this, I really appreciate it. And if you're looking for a place to run, I will leave a link to the Discord down below, and we'd love to have you come join us. We pretty much only run veteran trials, but we try to do things for newer people that are new to veteran trials, and we have a lot of people with a lot of experience that are happy to help you out. So come join us. We'd love to have you. And if you found this video helpful, please share it with others and let's get some people some clears on this trial.